First of all, thank you all for coming out. Just a quick reminder, this is a community event. We're here to, keep our community safe first and foremost. So we just ask real quick that folks respect social distancing guidelines, just to keep everyone safe, and keep your masks on when you're around people. So yeah, thank you. And we have masks up here if you need one, and we also have hand sanitizer. So just come up, grab whatever you need. Right here at the cart.
All right. Hello and welcome to Fryeburg, Maine. Yeah. Who brought their alarm bells? You bring an alarm bell? All right. So, thank you so much for coming out here to stand with us in the middle of a global pandemic to rally and sound the alarm about the largest private water transfer of water bottling in U.S. history. We're also here to say that Wall Street and water don't mix. Yeah, that's right. My name is Nikki Sakara, and I'm a Freiburg resident who used to do human rights advocacy on Capitol Hill. And I'm a co-founder of Community Water Justice. I was a trustee of the Freiburg Water District for a few terms, and I'm a founding board member of the Saco Headwaters Alliance, a part of Sunlight Media Collective, a proud mother, and a stubborn pain in the butt to those who mess with our water sources. I'd like to start today's event in appreciation and acknowledgement that while many of us have been fighting water protections for a long time, there is no community that has fought for generations so nobly and tirelessly on behalf of all life as the indigenous stewards of our home, the Wabanaki peoples of Maine. That's right. Their leadership on water stewardship is something we can all look to in finding solutions to our growing water problems. The Penobscot Nation tribal ambassador, Molly and Dana, sends her regrets for not being able to join us here today, but has kindly offered me some words to share with you. She says, "Our groundwater is precious, and while we recognize the need for providing drinking water to people, it is equally important that we focus on environmental impacts, including process and how the final product is bottled, along with a long-term impact. It is also important that we understand the resource and its limitations, and not to overstress it and to make sales in a deal this big. The environment cannot be managed by economic factors, and certainly not by Wall Street, but rather by scientists and indigenous knowledge to make sure this resource is here for us for future generations." As Penobscot people still living in our ancestral homelands, we know how precious and life-giving water is for our tribal communities and the whole state. We stand in opposition to the proposed action by Nestle and One Rock Capital Partners, and remind our friends and neighbors that water is life. Yeah, woo! That's right. Again, those were the words of Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador Molly and Dana. There were many members of the Indigenous community that wanted to be here with us today. But today is their traditional annual winter ceremony, and I hope as that we continue with our day, you will reflect upon the prayers they are offering for the water and for all of us, that we might be part of the healing of this territory we now call Maine. So now we know that Nestle, who is the world's largest corporate water bottler, is planning to sell its North American bulk water business, which includes Poland Spring, to a private equity firm, One Rock Capital Partners. The massive transfer of water wealth is estimated at $4 billion, and in an especially dangerous development in light of Wall Street's accelerating interest in water futures trading. December 7th, 2020 marked the first day in history that water was traded on Wall Street. Boo, that's right. And they are now coming for hours if we can't stop them in their tracks here and now. Something that sticks out to me about One Rock Capital is its partnership with the Mitsubishi Corporation. Mitsubishi has its hands in a couple different water privatization corporations in Asia and Africa, which happen to both have ties to the World Bank. One Rock is also a subsidiary of corporations who produce plastics and chemicals. Did you know that here in Freiburg, that a land holding company for a Bank of America owns land over the central part of our aquifer, whose land abuts property of Nestle? Is Bank of America positioning themselves to take their share of profit over our water source? We have questions. It seems as though things here are going according to their plan, and that plan is not congruent to the needs of our local community. So why is water privatization a bad thing? Because living without water is not an option. And when the price is driven due to shareholders' demand for increased profits, people are often forced to consume unsafe water because corporate agendas are driven by profits rather than the public good, and privatization typically results in the compromising of environmental standards. And our rural communities cannot afford to compete with Wall Street speculators for our groundwater. Nestle and Wall Street have a 100-year strategy for Maine's pristine water, while Maine does not have a 100-year strategy to protect it. Maine surface waters benefit from the protection of being under a public trust. However, our groundwater is without the same protection. Maine is only one of 3 states left with laws that remain on the books from the late 1800s. And is how Nestle has taken advantage to expand their exports to over 1 billion gallons per year, which currently equals more than 833 gallons per Maine resident per year. The Freiburg Water Company, who supplies our municipal water, is a private company. And it was they who sought this relationship with Nestle. Of course, there have been other notable town officials who have conflicts of interest that have aided and abetted this process. The Freiburg Water Company also pursued a U.S. precedent-setting 45-year contract even after our community did not consent to it. Water privatization is anti-democratic. And as our community and others in our national coalition well know, that our fight for water is our fight for our democratic process, transparency, and dignity. That's yeah. Nestle mines and exports what they call a sustainable yield, based upon their limited scientific speculations. Since they export what our aquifer can sustainably yield, that leaves us no room to grow our local rural economic base, which would require water resources to support it. Nestle's offering of strategic donations to select community organizations buys our silence, but it's time to end that silence. What's happening is known as elite capture. Elite capture is a form of corruption whereby public resources are biased for the benefit of a few individuals of superior economic status in detriment to the welfare of the larger population. The situation applies to Freiburg, to our neighbors in Denmark, and every town where water is being privatized. It's time for us to look around. There are many parts to this story that still need telling, but for today, I'll leave you with one last heads up. Ooh, the spirits are here. They're with us, that's good. The Maine Water Company, who currently manages our water system for the Freiburg Water Company, is not a local Maine company. Its parent company is the Connecticut Water Company, who recently went through a $1 billion merger with San Jose Water, who now owns water systems in California, in Texas, in Connecticut, and now Maine. This merger boosted them to become the third largest private water utility in the United States and are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Maine Water Company now owns water systems in almost 20 towns and cities in Maine and has expressed interest in buying the Freiburg Water Company. This creates a perfect storm for escalating water privatization in Maine and losing local control. We have a lot of work to do. So before I hand it over to our next speaker, I hope that everybody that comes here today, that you'll leave us your name and email, and we can circulate that after, because we do have a couple bills going through at the state level that we could use your support on. The bills haven't come back from the revisor's office yet, so we don't have the language, and I'm hesitant to and I don't have a legislative docket number. So we're happy to pass off that information when it's available. So, all right, now, next order of business, we have Luke. Our next speaker, Luke, has the unique distinction of being my son. He is a senior at Freiburg Academy, where he recently led a student-driven plastic reduction initiative. He is the youth co-founder of Community Water Justice, a Maine Seed with the Seeds of Peace program, and on the organizing committee of the Maine Environmental Justice Changemakers Network, to name a few. But he's humble and didn't want me to mention any more than that. So, Luke.
All right, thank you all for coming today. I'm very glad to see you. Some of you I know, and many of you I hope to know in the future. Before I start, I would like to show some appreciation to the youth who have turned out today, my fellow students at Fryeburg Academy. We will be inheriting this world and the mess that our predecessors have created for us. We are also coming of age in a time when water scarcity is an increasing threat to the security of our future. In Freiburg, we have a front row seat to the problem of water privatization. It's stressful for me to see the Poland Spring water trucks leaving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with our water, knowing the long-term impacts of large-scale water extraction on our future. Over a year ago, we were visited by our friends from Vittel, France, who are fighting Nestlé's privatization of water sources in the French countryside. They told us that in their area, the farmers have to import water to sustain their crops and farm animals because Nestlé took the rights to the sustainable yield of their groundwater. What happened there could very easily happen here, but we can make this a turning point in the direction of community stewardship over our water sources, with future generations in mind. While we are opposed to the bottled water industry in general, we understand that sharing water among communities that are undergoing water-related emergencies is necessary. Take, for example, Flint, Michigan, whose water crisis has devastated low-income, predominantly black communities. Our problem is that the distribution of water to those in need should be done as a humanitarian effort and not by corporations with the goal of making profits. The legalized theft of our water is a threat that has to be dealt with immediately. As water shortages and natural disasters become more common on a global scale, we have to recognize that exploiting our most valuable resources for the sole purpose of increased profits is not the solution. In the State House, there are Nestlé employees on the Board of Environmental Protection and the Maine Drinking Water Program. Nestlé has also had financial ties to members of the Public Utilities Commission, the very people who originally oversaw the hearing process for the 45-year contract. This shows us a dramatic failure of our system. the corruption of the very positions meant to hold the state and corporations accountable to the environment and the very people who rely on it. Aside from the danger to our community posed by water privatization, the bottled water industry does significant harm to the environment worldwide. In 2020, Nestle was named one of the biggest plastic polluters on the planet for a third year in a row. This is mainly because of single-serve packaging. On a global scale, more than 480 billion plastic water bottles are consumed each year. Most of that plastic has ended up in landfills, the ocean, and our waterways. On top of all that, the bottled water industry is closely tied to the fossil fuel industry. In the United States alone, the bottled water industry has used 76 million barrels of oil for manufacturing and distribution in a single year. We cannot trust corporations like Nestle, whose motivator is profit, to act with concern for environmental sustainability or our best interests. Nor can we trust a political system that gives corporate interests an elevated, protected status in exchange for campaign contributions. Both are complicit in undermining our water security. Community water justice is part of a growing alignment of all identities from across the world that is resisting water privatization and challenging the corrupt systems that are allowing it to take place. To have a clean environment for ourselves and future generations is our right. To ensure that our rights are protected, it is our responsibility to take action. And if we ignore our responsibilities to protect them, we risk losing our rights. Thank you.
As bleak as this all sounds today, it's really hopeful to have young people speaking out on this issue. So thank you, Luke. And thank you to all the Freiburg Academy and other students that are here today. We appreciate you.
How many of those years have passed?
2016, they approved it. And to be clear, the contract is, Nestle tried to pass a 50-year contract out in California and failed miserably. So what they did was, what they tried in Maine, they packaged it differently. So they said, oh, it's a 20-year contract with 5 automatic, 5-year extensions. But the public doesn't have any input in that interim because they made that contract with another private company. So, yeah. All right. So, our next esteemed speaker is none other than Nora Schwartz. Yeah, give it up for Nora. Nora is not only a concerned community member, but the chair of the Friends of the Freiburg Public Library, committee member on the Freiburg Parks, Open Spaces, and Beautification Committee, trustee of the Freiburg Water District, alternate Freiburg Commissioner on the Saco River Corridor Commission, and board member of the Saco Headwaters Alliance. Nora?
Yeah. Okay, so you can hear me, right? Yeah. I am going to speak rather quickly because there is a lot in here. But if I leave you with nothing else, remember that the Freiburg Water District, which was established by the legislature, says that we, the Freiburg Water District, representing Freiburgians who vote for the trustees, should be in charge of the water. Water is life. That's not a trite expression. It is a fact. When human babies are first born, their makeup is 75% water. Even an older middle-aged woman like me is made up of 47% water. The World Health Organization estimates that human beings need between 25 and 50 liters of water a day to maintain basic health and hygiene. This is called our basic water requirement. But imagine living on just 25 liters, 6.6 gallons of water a day, and maintaining your dignity. For most of us, that would be difficult. 1 gallon is the recommended 8 glasses of water an adult should consume daily. The remaining 5.6 gallons allows 3 flushes of a toilet manufactured since 1994. The last half gallon needs to facilitate hand washing, not just during a pandemic. If washing after flushing the toilet 3 times a day and before preparing food at least 2 times per day, rinsing with only 1 cup of water each time after lathering with no running water, 3 cups of water will be all that remains to cook with, bathe with, and wash clothes with. For some of you, the history may not be as clear as it should be. In 2005, Peter Breivik-Letmev, Nestle's CEO between 1997 and 2008, said in a documentary entitled "We Feed the World," quotes, "Water is, of course, the most important raw material we have today in the world. It's a question of whether we should privatize the normal water supply for the population. And there are 2 different opinions on the matter. The one opinion, which I think is extreme, is represented by the NGOs who bang on about declaring water a public right. That means that as a human being, you should have a right to water. That's an extreme solution," end quote. In 2013, 8 years later, with continued criticism by numerous human rights groups who believe that the video pitted the world's largest seller of bottled water against 800 million people across the globe struggling to access what little water they need to survive, he blogged his clarification, carefully stating that access to enough water for basic subsistence, and no more than that, is a human right. But what constitutes the human right? The human right to water protects both the water we need to survive and the water we need to live in dignity. That's an important distinction between the 2. Here in and around the village of Freiburg, we have had more people who use water from their own private wells for their daily survival needs reporting their wells have gone dry. Our brooks, creeks, streams, rivers, and ponds have visibly lower water levels than in previous years, particularly in the summer, which is, by the way, when Nestle draws more water. Agricultural entities, i.e. Weston's Farm, Green Thumb Farm, and many smaller farms who are cultivating the soil, growing crops, raising livestock, need more water during the increasingly warmer, drier months. Maine had its drier summer than ever this year. We had no rain, as you may remember. Despite these developments, as well as evidence of effects on important flora and fauna, Nestle's pumping of 350,000 gallons of water per day, 118 million gallons of water in 2019, proceeds unabated. Emory and Garrett Groundwater Investigations has been monitoring the situation since they were engaged to study the effects on the Wardsbrook aquifer of water extraction for the village's use combined with Nestle's bulk water extraction in 2005. They have been acquired by GZA Geo Environmental, and their most recent report to the Freiburg's town manager in March of 2020 did include, quotes, EGGI recommends that the town continue the long-term groundwater and surface water monitoring program as a means of monitoring the condition of Wardsbrook aquifer. I'm not going to go into it, but there are specifics, 2 specific recommendations that they wrote to our town manager should be done because they have concerns and they don't want to be responsible. The Freiburg Water Company, which Nikki mentioned earlier. Originally established as the Freiburg Aqueduct Corporation in 1813 and incorporated in 1879, like the Freiburg Water District, is regulated under the Public Utility Law. The Freiburg Water Company trustees did, as Nikki said, initiate the sale of the Wardsbrook Aquifer resources to a multinational corporation. Profit from the sale has covertly been for a few investors. It doesn't come back to the town. There is a small portion, and I will mention how much that is. But the fact of the matter is, we don't ever see the people from the Freiburg Water Company. We never get to ask any questions, and we never get to pursue any of our concerns. Profit from the sale, sadly, as Luke said, a number of the PUC representatives who voted in favor of Nestle's 45-year contract with the Freiburg Water Company have direct ties to Nestle. Currently, the repeated attempts by the Freiburg Water District to discuss the bulk water extraction and other concerns with the Freiburg Water Company have been ignored over and over and over again. The officers and largest shareholders of the Freiburg Water Company are townspeople, but their agenda is hidden from all. My one note about Maine Water is that they are continuing to use scare tactics to dissuade Freiburg village citizens from placing their confidence in the Freiburg Water District. I don't have a complaint with how they're running the water service to our community. And I do know that they have been part of some discussions about the fact that perhaps water should not be privatized. I think that there are reasons that they have made these statements that are not purely altruistic. The Freiburg Water District Charter, established by the legislature in 2006 and amended in 2007, charges the elected trustees with the responsibility of ensuring access to water of pure quality and adequate quantity for district residents and businesses. Empowered by the people of Freiburg as chartered by the state of Maine, please vote. Please vote when we have our elections. Please reach out to us. We are here to serve you. Are tasked to own and manage the water. We are tasked to own and manage the water delivery system for public benefit. This statutory right to acquire the privately owned Freiburg Water Company by eminent domain and, as a nonprofit, pursue grants to invest in conjunction with the same fees currently charged by Maine Water in long overdue and increasingly unstable infrastructure, including but not limited to lead service lines, replacements for homeowners and schools, assessing and addressing water contamination from PFAS, and installing a wastewater treatment facility or community leach field, allowing for downtown development while protecting our natural resources. Nestle's investment of $144,000 per year, $12,000 a month, to the town, plus a few small scholarships to the schools and some cases of water to the town office, fire department, and police, is not enough. Neither are there self-preserving efforts to protect the aquifer. But if they sell to Wall Street, they'll care even less. Bolstered by the vote of their constituents, the Freiburg Water District trustees will lead Maine, our country, and the world in recognizing that the privatization of water supplies and the exportation of a community's resource that is deemed a right of humanity is not in the best interest of the public community's health and well-being. Please learn more. Talk about it with other people. Follow community water justice and support their efforts on behalf of the Water Act of 2021. And follow the Freiburg Water District on behalf of our town, starting today. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Nora. I'm going to tell you a little just for a second, tell you a little story about this alarm bell that I have. It was manufactured around the same year that Poland Spring Company was created back in the mid-1800s. And this was a fire bell, a fire alarm bell that they used for bucket brigades. So it seemed appropriate to have it here today for this cause. So, how are we all feeling? Are we warm? Are we cold? Do we need to run in place? Good. All right. Don't be afraid to run in place whenever you need. And if you have to go to the bathroom, I think the gas station has a bathroom. So, yeah. That leads us to our next speaker. Nels Liljedahl has been living in Freiburg for 27 years and has raised 2 children that are now young adults who have also decided to stay and live in Freiburg because they share the same love for this town as he does. And I believe I saw one of his children here today, or his grown adults. He is a graduate of the University of Maine with degrees in forestry, environmental science, and park and recreation management. He is on his 3rd career as a district conservationist for Natural Resources Conservation Service. His first career was as a professional wilderness canoe expedition guide, which allowed him to live on rivers for 7 years. This experience helped give him a spiritual connection to water and nature. He was a past trustee of the Freiburg Water District, one of the founding board of directors of the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust, and is presently serving on the board of directors for Saco Headwaters Alliance and advisory board of the New Hampshire Native Fish Coalition. So let's give it up for Nels.
Hello, everybody. Beautiful day here in Fryeburg, Maine. Happy to be here. So 20 years ago, the town hired me to develop an open space plan for Freiburg, which I did. It was a great opportunity for me. And while doing the research for it, I discovered some very interesting facts about the water resources here in Freiburg. We have a large and productive aquifer here right under our feet that has some of the best water anywhere on the planet. We're very lucky people. The mighty Saco River courses through our town and has water available throughout the summer because the aquifer discharges its water into the river through its springs. There are 13 streams in Freiburg that empty into the Saco, and these are also spring-fed, in addition to surface runoff and snow melt. These streams total 42 miles in length. There are 30 ponds within Freiburg. The combined total acreage is 3,528 acres. This is a lot. This is 9.2% of the land area of Freiburg. The largest pond is Kieser Pond, which is 1,300 acres in size, and the smallest is Round Pond, which is 6 acres in size. Round Pond has no outlet and is within the area of the Wards Brook Aquifer. It is mostly spring-fed, so it is a very good indicator of the water levels of the aquifer. The levels of the pond have been decreasing over the past decade or so, and that corresponds with the levels recorded in the nearest monitoring well number 110, in case anybody wants to look it up in the Emery and Garrett report. There are also many other wetlands in Freiburg, ranging from small vernal pools to larger areas that are designated as prime wetlands by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All of these surface waters are directly related to the groundwater in the aquifer. During times of high rainfall and snowmelt, these waters help replenish the aquifer. And in turn, at other times, the aquifer discharges water to these surface water bodies. It is part of the hydrologic cycle. Back in 1972, I was about the age of Luke and all of his peers here from Freiburg Academy back then. And thanks to our Maine Senator Ed Muskie, the Clean Water Act was established. This act provided for many policies, regulations, and enforcement mechanisms to clean up our surface and groundwaters and help them stay clean. The Clean Water Act has been extremely beneficial to all forms of life. However, it comes at a cost to all of us that pay municipal, state, and federal taxes. It is well worth the cost because it produces a benefit that allows our very existence, clean water. There are also many nonprofit environmental organizations that use their resources to help keep our water clean through various methods. Some local organizations that come to mind directly benefit Freiburg in this way are the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust, the Saco River Corridor Commission, the Freiburg Water District, the Saco Headwaters Alliance, and even the Freiburg Conservation Committee. So I have a question for all of you. Do you think it is fair for the collective citizenry to put such a great deal of effort and money into making sure we all have adequate supplies of clean water, but we allow large corporations to claim the rights to this water, extract it in huge amounts, put it into little plastic bottles that degrade our environment, including the oceans, and then sell it back to us at an immense profit? No! Right answer. Yell aloud, ring the bells. No way! No way! Thank you.
Yeah, you gotta love the drum we have down here and its message. So you can take your frustrations out on this drum. So we have a natural looking hammer. And so any anger that you have in you to release, just take it out right there and we'll all enjoy it. Okay, next. I feel lucky to call our next speaker a dear friend and co-conspirator. Heather Rettberg drove all the way from Penobscot, Maine to be with us today. Heather and I worked on a food and water sovereignty bill a few years ago at the state level, but soon realized that Poland Springs' corporate power in our state house created a wall around us. And the Joint Standing Committee quickly took the water part out of the food and water bill. As we know, we cannot be food sovereign without being water sovereign. As we welcome Heather, let's first give a shout out to our neighbors in Brownfield, who after learning that Nestle wanted to export their water, blocked them by adopting a strong water ordinance to protect themselves. Yeah. But after that, they took it even further. They adopted a local food and community self-governance ordinance to give them the best set of food and water security protections in the area. So where are our friends from Brownfield here? Brownfield? Yeah, we're all right. All right. Represent. Glad to see you. Additionally, the town of Porter is currently working toward the same. Porter in the house. Where are you, Porter? Porter? Oh, yeah, Porter! It's time to look toward their model. So let's give a shout to Porter, Brownfield, Heather Rettberg for creating a sustainable model for their communities. Yeah. So if we work together here in Freiburg, we could follow that model. So, Heather.
Ordinances, where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I am so glad we drove all the way from Penobscot to be with you all today. I'm glad we took a wrong turn. I'm sorry we were late, but I'm glad we were able to drive through Brownfield on the way. We had a little celebration in the car because I've been able to communicate with people by email and by phone and wonder about the places where people are ready to participate and engage in ways that can feel scary, and to stand up and be nervous at town meetings, but still stand up and still protect our food exchanges, protect our traditional foodways, and make sure that we're protecting our water. As Nikki said, there is no food sovereignty without water sovereignty. There is no local food without local water. I wanted to share a story with you to start today about my son, who now is old enough to have driven me halfway here, which is so great, almost all of the time. When he was younger, he wanted to know what there was to drink for supper that night, and we were in the usual kind of hangry stages of the day after evening milking time and getting supper together, and I said, well, we've got, milk or cider or water. And he had these chocolate brown eyes with long eyelashes, and he was always very charming. He learned to wink before any of the children. And he got a twinkle in his eye. I don't remember how old he was, but he looked at me and he said, "So there's pretty much just water. I can have water run through a tree, or water run through a cow, or water." And I love that story. I think I've remembered it all these years because it's not just a story that endears him to me. Of course, we press our own cider, we milk our own cows. It would be clear to a small child living on a farm how the food got to the table. It isn't necessarily clear to everyone how important water is to food. And he knew that there was no cider, there was no milk if there was no water. And I wanted to bring that message to you all here today, to understand that connection is a direct link. The community stewardship of resources that are essential to life is so necessary in our time. We've had, as was mentioned by one of the speakers I was able to hear, we've had 4 droughty years in a row in Maine. Over in Hancock County where we farm, after June, we just haven't been getting rain, and we've adapted some of our grazing practices to make a living mulch of the pasture, to retain as much water as we can. We're building up the organic matter in the soil to conserve all the water that we get. But if no rain comes, the hay, the grass just doesn't grow, and there's no forage. That means in Maine right now, there are a lot of us farmers looking in our barns and wondering if the hay is going to last until the spring, until the grass grows again, because there wasn't as much hay to make this year because there wasn't enough water. So that means while Nestle is taking water out of Maine, farmers are importing water into Maine through hay from New York State, through hay from Canada, because there wasn't enough here. Without water, without hay, there is no milk. There is no livestock. The vegetables are stunted and don't grow. So the pandemic that we're all experiencing in these times has exposed many vulnerabilities in our food system. I think what showed up first in Maine at the end of the line as we are is the fragility of our supply chain, and how a disruption that happens someplace in the Midwest or even just outside our borders can mean that we're going to have no food in our supermarkets. Maine imports 90% of our food. We're vulnerable. There are groups of us in the farming world, in community economic development, in bank and finance that have been talking and throwing ideas around ever since March about how can we increase our food resilience in the state of Maine. And part of every conversation like that has to be, how do we protect our groundwater in the state of Maine? We need, yeah, ring the bells. We have to, in order to become more resilient, increasingly up our ability to adapt. If water isn't here for Maine people and for food production, and it's up for the highest bidder on Wall Street, we don't have much of a chance. So back in 2009 was the beginning of my involvement in the world beyond the farm. Our family was all pretty young then, and we felt like we had our hands full building up a farm and raising a family. But I think God had some other things in mind and figured our arms could stretch a little and our muscles could grow a little. And we started engaging in the world of laws and policies and rules and regulations, because things changed in 2009 for farmers. We lost any kind of seat at the decision-making table about how the rules and laws about food were being made. We lost the ability to define ourselves and what we do. And as we first got drawn into this whole web of human relation in politics, we thought it was just asking for more scale-appropriate regulations for farms. But what became very clear very early on was that that was just a teeny tip of the iceberg. It was a symptom. And underneath that was that we had lost the most elemental pieces of self-definition. If the state, because of federal pressure, because of corporate pressure, could redefine us from being farmers into food distributors, they could slowly disappear or quickly disappear much of the small farm movement that was beginning to grow in our county and across the state. And that's what was happening. We'd been redefined, put into a different category that was beyond our ability to adapt financially, which would have disappeared much of what was happening. So after a decade of work to protect our traditional foodways, we worked at the local level. As Nikki said, we drafted something called the Local Food and Community Self-Governance Ordinance. In that ordinance, we defined ourselves at the municipal level, asserted that we had constitutionally in Maine's Constitution a right to define ourselves and our food system, how we exchange food, to determine how our food needs are met. We'd been shut out of the decision-making rooms, not invited to the tables, and essentially written off as unimportant. Those rules were going to be all set, being made far away from our farms and our communities. Well, the first food ordinance is passed. I'm very happy to say we're coming up on town meeting season right now in Maine, and those first food ordinances passed in March of 2011. We're coming up on a decade of people stepping forward in communities all across Maine. There are now 85 towns and cities in every single one of Maine's 16 counties that have taken that step forward towards self-governance, self-determination. And at the heart of food sovereignty, at the heart of water sovereignty, is that the people who eat food, the people that use water, need to be at the heart of decision-making about how those needs are met and how those resources are stewarded.
That's right.
So we took back that legal space through local law, and it took another 6 or 7 years for the state to recognize that our assertions were valid, which they did. And since then, the number of towns that have enacted that local law has quadrupled.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go on too much longer. I can't tell you how heartened I am by what you're all doing here, how heartened I am by what Brownfield and Porter are doing to make sure that water is part of that. As Nikki said, we tried at the state level. That Maine Food Sovereignty Act went in as the Maine Food and Water Sovereignty Act, and it was almost whiplash-inducing how quickly the water got taken out of that law, and how many different types of suits came into the room to make sure that water would not be included. The trucking industry, blueberries, potatoes, everybody has their hands in the water, but did not want to recognize a town, a community's authority to steward that resource. So that was really eye-opening, and the Poland Spring representative, as Nikki, I think, and I both remember so clearly, said before that committee of our state's agriculture, or it was a different committee, a state and local government committee, said, local control threatens our parent company. And that was all we needed to hear. They were here a week later saying we love to work with local governments, and had a lovely PowerPoint presentation that was the opposite of what they told our legislators. So we rely obviously on water, we rely on food for our lives. People need a legally protected space to safeguard the water, to ensure that Maine's towns and cities have a voice in the stewardship. Small farmers, I do not represent them all, but I the small farmer, am here today to stand with the water protectors, To ensure resilient food supply into Maine's future, people must have a voice in determining how the groundwater is stewarded. And I want to close with a question, just like the previous speaker. How will we ensure food for Maine's future if water is sold as futures on Wall Street?
So that, it encapsulates the relationship of Nestle and the state perfectly, and where Heather reminded us of what Nestle had said to us in the hearing that day, that local control would be a threat to the parent company. And there you have the relationship between the state and the corporation. So before I introduce the final speaker, I'm going to do a little trivia. So I have a poster or two of this fine piece of artwork here to my right, by the the Beehive Design Collective, who are based in Machias, well known world round. And so the trivia question is, what are the names of the Nestle or Poland Spring employees that sit on our Board of Environmental Protection and on the board of the Maine Drinking Water Program? Raise your hand. I'm going to try to see who. Oh! Mark Dubois, yeah? What? Oh! Okay, well, who knows the other one? Who knows? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, that's right. Well, you won the poster. You fooled yourself on that one there. You're up here. So, anyway. So our next speaker, Lori Lamountain, is a Denmark resident, and for those who may not know, Denmark is a neighboring town where water is also mined under the Poland Spring brand. She helped organize Water for Denmark, a watchdog committee formed in 2016 to oversee Nestle Water North America's 5-year permit renewal process, as well as proposing changes to strengthen the town's large-scale water extraction ordinance. They have done some great work in Denmark, and they have a really tough job, but let's welcome Lori to the stage.
That's a good crowd. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. And thanks, Nikki, for letting me speak. Okay, so Water for Denmark, organized in response to Poland Spring, Nestle Waters North America's quiet and efficient means of altering our large-scale water extraction ordinance to better serve their bottom line. In a regularly scheduled select board meeting, which, as many of our town's Tuesday night meetings in late winter, it was not well attended by residents, i.e. voters. Poland Spring Nestle Waters easily managed to lower the alert and action levels and change the drought index they'd been using in order to give them more latitude in pumping operations at Cold Spring Aquifer in Denmark. And just so you know, they're allowed to pump over 100 million gallons per year from our little hamlet. So those changes were requested and allowed by the select board in 2012. But it took the drought in 2016 to wake us up to implications of being asleep while decisions that affected us all were being implemented. My point is, in addition to everything else you're having to pay attention to these days, it's critical that you stay engaged and informed on what's happening in your town that affects your water and your neighbor's water. It shouldn't take a crisis like a drought to wake us up to the fact that water is an essential human right that requires our constant community stewardship in order to protect it from private corporations that seek to grab it for their own profit. In the face of this planned sale, it falls on all of us to make sure we're involved in negotiating changes to existing contracts and are engaged in efforts to protect our groundwater from corporations who seek, through a lack of transparency, to control it for private profit. It's obvious through the intended sale of its bulk bottled water industry that communities' action against Nestle is working. Due to community water justice and all of us applying pressure, it has become impossible for Nestle and other corporations to ignore our efforts to protect our fundamental water rights. Don't give up. Or as my Irish husband would say, Chucky Air Law. And that means our day will come.
So great. Luke and one final thing before we head down the road. All right, we've learned a lot here today. There's been a lot of work done in the past many years by a lot of people to get to this moment. And so we have a list of 4 demands, right? These demands are more of a roadmap in how we can protect our water and keep Wall Street out of our Main Street and out of our aquifer. So, number 1, stop the privatization of Maine's water, right? We need to keep stewardship in the hands of the community and not corporations in Wall Street. Number 2, no transfer of Nestle contracts in the sale. Contracts are not transferable to any new buyer, and certainly no long-term contracts. Number 3, expand the data of our aquifer study. Yeah. And this would include the recommendations proposed by the Freiburg Water District. A few years ago, we had sat down with the selectmen and the planning board to try to work out our recommendations, but they refused them. So we need to go back to the table and get that to happen. And demand full transparency in water negotiations. No closed-door meetings between elected officials or municipal water suppliers and water privatizers out of the view of the public. We ask that the Freiburg Water Company enters into community negotiations to work toward the transferring of assets to the Freiburg Water District. Yeah. They may seem like a lot, but I think it's a really great roadmap to get us where we need to go.